every single reason why I'm so much strong.
Hi, welcome to the Legal Connection Show. This is Toni Lynn Collins, the TLC in the Legal Connection TLC. I usually co-host the show with Cheryl Jahani on Tuesdays from 12 to 1. Cheryl is in Cabo right now. She's just returning from her Memorial Weekend celebration. The Legal Connection Show is a public service show that is provided to the, I guess, primarily to people in Montgomery County, but we are all over the world on the internet. So we answer questions that have to do with Texas. I'm a Texas licensed attorney. And so we are on Facebook at www.facebooklegalconnectionshow.com live. So if you have any questions, go ahead and go to that Facebook site on your phone or on your computer and ask your questions, and I'll try to answer those for you. A disclaimer is I don't represent you, but I am licensed and I will try to do the best I can to guide you. We're also on irlonestarradio.com. So go ahead and boot up your computer if you're listening right now on the radio at 106.1 or FM 104.5. If you go in the house, if you just want to listen on the radio or on Facebook, just boot us up. Today we have a really, really good show. I'm going to cover 3 topics: Memorial Day, and the law going all the way back to Moses. I think that's I'm going to tie that into the law as we have it today. And most importantly, a really popular topic is wills and estates. Backed by popular demand, I'm going to be answering a lot of questions about how you probate a will here in Montgomery County or Harris or any county in Texas, as well as what you need to do if you don't have a will, or if you have a will and there's no need to probate it. And we're going to answer some questions that I have about that I've gotten on Facebook. So to start out, I went to Mass this morning, and I just felt really compelled to go to the chapel and find out what I needed to do the show about other than wills. And the first thing I picked up was Our Lady of Sorrows. It was a new brochure. It's the Rosary of the 7 Sorrows of the Blessed Mother. And I thought, how does that have anything to do with the legal connection? And I realized it really had to do with Memorial Day. And we need to put put ourselves in the same spot that Mary was in. She had her son who basically martyred himself for all of our sins. And that's kind of what Memorial Day is about. Memorial Day is people that give up their life for their country, in service of their country, and all people that are in service. And that was like one of the most important commandments, is serving God by serving others. And if you just think back about just Texas independence and how the settlers came about, and they came out here with the Indians and trying to settle this completely arid land that had no air conditioning, that was hostile for the most part. And then we had these settlers come over coming from the east, going west, including the Austin colony and Stephen F. Austin and that whole group, working with the Mexicans who really hadn't settled this area out here at all. It was mostly Indians, and they would get attacked by settlers coming out here from the settlers who would sort of cultivate it and fight off Indians and establish themselves. And that's sort of in a nutshell, not being a historian, how Stephen F. Austin's colony got settled right out here in Montgomery County, the original 300, in about 1825. And it really wasn't that long ago. 1825 was, that was maybe 150 years ago or somewhat. We had many people that fought for the independence of Texas, and they got surveys of land named after them because of their martyrism. And one that comes to mind is the Sieberman Survey. The Sieberman Survey was given to Frederick Sieberman for him fighting in the Texas independence. And and in 1836, so he died at the Goliad. He was slaughtered by Santa Anna. And because of that, he was awarded a lot of land. And so he's memorialized. His name is memorialized forever in our state with a survey. Then they went out and they surveyed it. And there's an area where, he was an area that's established that has his name on it. And that was really, we have to look to that when we look at our surveys and maps on what the land that we own, and kind of think back on how did this survey get its name. And in this case, Frederick Sieberman died for our country. And so we're sort of celebrating Memorial Day, I guess the post-Memorial Day for that type of I guess, martyrism, or for heroism, for the right thing, for justice. And just to kind of tie in, what Mary was going through, I didn't even know what the 7 sorrows of Mary were. And it was just sitting here in the chapel. And think about this. Mary had this son, and she was just a young girl, maybe 13 or 14, when the Holy Spirit allowed her to conceive, or asked her to, and she accepted receiving, our Savior. And just briefly, the things that she went through were tremendous. When she brought her little baby in to be baptized, there was a prophecy that he was going to be martyred, basically, for our sins. Then there was the flight to Egypt. She had to leave Egypt with her baby because the king was going to kill all the firstborn. Then she loses her 12-year-old in the temple. Can you imagine losing your 12-year-old? I mean, knowing that it's the Son of God and you lose him. I mean, what a horrible thing. Just that tension alone, thinking about it, if my son was lost and I had to go back and try to find him in a menagerie of a massive convention, and which, of course, at the time was the Passover. Mary actually meets her son on the way of his conviction, on his way to Calvary. I can't even imagine that happening when you have an innocent person that's being condemned and being put to death, and the mother having to see this. She was at the foot of the cross while he was dying. I mean, knowing that he hadn't done anything and having to endure that. She receives his body down from the cross, and then she had to put him in his tomb. And that really is a lot of what many mothers have to go through, or had to go through, when their sons gave their lives up for fighting for justice for our country. And parents too, not just mothers, but that's what Mary went through. So that was just sort of my Memorial Day, sort of putting that together on maybe why that was what we needed to speak of. But really, we have to honor our veterans. We have to remember our veterans, and remember that all the way back, as far as the big book that we have as our knowledge base for the most important history book, first printed by I guess, who was the guy that did the first printing press? Forgetting that it was in 1400. Do you remember, Ethan? Who did the printing press? I can't remember. I just read about Guggenheim. The Guggenheim Bible was the first mass printed manual, and it was printed in, I guess, the 1400s. And there's a whole story behind that we learned when we went to the Bible Museum. But anyway, that being said, yes, Memorial Day was a fun weekend, and my co-host Cheryl was, I guess, having margaritas out on the beach in Cabo. And I cannot say that I'm jealous, because traveling can be exhausting. Now, that being said, the other thing I picked up today in the chapel was, and I really didn't know which direction I was going with this, was a brochure on the law that was given to Moses. And that was the 10 Commandments. And I have my little 10 Commandments here, if you can see it on Facebook or on the internet, live, our podcast. And it's all written in English. But the reality is, when Moses was given the 10 Commandments, I don't even think anybody wrote back then. And we don't know what language God spoke, but it was probably in some form of, it may have been in Hebrew or like a Paleo-Arabic. But the one I have right here has got, like, it looks like it might be in Hebrew. Anyway, I think just, there's really no saying what language it was in, but it's in Hebrew and these old tablets, and we've got it translated into English. And, the laws of the 10 Commandments and Moses really equate, and there's a close analogy to the laws that we have today. And I'm just going to go over those 10 real quick before we go on to our topic of wills. Today, because it's a very popular topic, and I'm getting lots of questions on wills, I'm going to go over again about what was requirement for a will to be to be valid, how you probate a will, and what would happen if you don't have a will. And then I'm going to answer a lot of our viewer questions that I got over the weekend about wills. But to hit on just the major points, the 10 Commandments, I am the Lord thy God, thou shalt not have, this pamphlet says strange gods before me. And it forbids idolatry and attendance at false worship and that kind of thing. Thou shalt not take the Lord's name in vain. And that forbids blasphemy and false oaths and breaking vows. Remember, the third one is remember, keep holy the Sabbath day. So try not to miss church and try not to buy and sell a whole bunch of stuff on Sundays if you can help it. It even says court trials shouldn't occur on Sundays, and they don't. So we're holding that up. And God we trust is on every dollar bill. I think that we can safely say that the state of Texas is honoring that, as well as Montgomery County. The honor your father and mother is huge. Remember, we all get in fights with and it kind of links in with, segues into wills and estates. We get in fights with our parents. Our parents do the best that they can. Our parents get older. A lot of times we disagree with them, and then we have some memories of things that aggravate us about our parents. But honor your father and your mother. God gave you to them for a reason. And we're getting ready to go on break, and we're going to finish up with the last 6 commandments briefly and go on to wills and estates. This is the Legal Connection Show, and we'll talk to you when we get back.
Listen in Mondays at noon to hear Conroe news from local nonprofits, businesses, upcoming events, Conroe Park events, news stories, and information that matters to you with your host, Margie Taylor of Taylorized PR. For more information about being a guest, visit irlonestar.com/Conroe Culture.
Lone Star Community Radio is looking for those who are interested in hosting their own talk show, with monthly and weekly slots available on Conroe's FM 104.5, 106.1, and on irlonestar.com. Start your own podcast, create your first YouTube channel, and be on TV. Contact Lone Star Community Radio online at irlonestar.com or call the message line at 936-647-3776. to take your first step into the radio world.
For those of you who like your partners, your gumbo, and your music salty, well, we're here to help with the music. Julian Shea here, host of Lone Star Country Nights Thursday, your weekly dose of roots and Americana and all the music that makes this part of the country special. We stir in Western swing, honky-tonk, Zydeco, Texas blues, outlaw country, and put a pinch of red dirt, and then we smoke it over a slow fire. Then listen to the results Thursday nights on Conroe's 104.5 and 106.1 and worldwide at irlonestar.com.
Welcome back to the Legal Connection Show. We're here on Tuesdays between noon and 1 on FM 104.5 and 106.1, as well as irlonestarradio.com. You can get us on the internet. And if you want to Facebook any questions, we're at facebook.com Legal Connection Show. And I will answer any questions that y'all sent to me on Facebook Live. Okay, so finish up the last 6 of these commandments and how they relate and can be analogized to our current laws. I mean, the commandments really are pretty much followed by our law. And I'm going to finish up these, and they're very important. I don't want to rush through them, but I want to get to our topic, which is wills. Thou shalt not kill. This commandment forbids unjust killing. So if you're at war and you had to go to war, or somebody's fighting you or defending yourself, that's not the same. But unjust killing, suicide, abortion, sterilization, endangering life and limb of another or others. Okay. Thou shalt not commit adultery. And if most people think of adultery, they think of cheating on your spouse. That's not the only thing it is. Adultery can also be obscene speech, impure actions alone or with others. So, try to steer away from that. Just not good. That's frowned upon in heaven. Thou shalt not steal. There's a ton of real live, real English words that go with this, not just thou shalt not steal. Theft, damage to property of others, not paying just debts. So pay your credit card. That's also a sin if you've got the money and you choose not to pay, or your rent for that matter. Not returning found or borrowed articles. And we've had other shows on that. There's certain exceptions to that rule if you find something. Giving unjust measure or weight in selling. So, ripping somebody off, basically. Not paying just wages. Pay your employees properly. Our life is just a mess. You're going to have to answer to a higher authority later if you don't treat people right. Bribery, graft, cheating, fraud, accepting stolen property, not giving an honest day's work for wages. Yeah, don't go in there watching the internet and playing on Facebook when your employer is paying you to work, because you can do that another time. And violation of contract. These are all considered sins, so don't be doing that. And this all of it's not criminal law, but civil law. We all know better. These are laws that we know that we're breaking if we don't do that. And they're sort of, I guess, by our statutory law, our Deceptive Trade Practices Act, all the laws in the state of Texas have some direct relationship to the Ten Commandments of Moses. The eighth commandment is, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. And that includes lying, injury to the good name of others, that would be defamation, slander, contemptuous speech, and violation of secrecy. So don't be spreading rumors about people that aren't true. Just not a nice thing to do. Let's all be positive. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. That's a big one. Willful, impure thoughts about your neighbor's wife. I think King David got in trouble for that with Bathsheba, but then he wrote, 150 Psalms, I believe, maybe afterward, trying to get contrition from God, which he did get because he really felt bad about it. Just don't go there. And then the last one is, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods. The desire to take, keep, or to damage the property of others is not a good thing. And so I don't know why that in this show, I was sort of directed to talk about the seven sorrows of Mary as it relates to Memorial Day, I guess, and the law of Moses as it relates to the Ten Commandments in our laws in Texas. But somebody out there must have needed to hear that, because that was what I was sort of directed to. Okay, now, that being said, we're going to go to wills and estates. And, I think the reason the topic of wills is so important and critical and comes up so much is, what do you do with the things that you've acquired during your life after you die? Because dust to dust, we come with nothing, we leave with nothing. And is it really, is it truly right to be kind of looking at what you might acquire and benefit by with regard to someone's demise, inheriting? I guess personally don't feel like that's something that you should be hanging your hat on. Oh boy, I'm going to be rich when, old Aunt Mildred dies, or when my parents die, or whatever. So just don't really go there. If people can choose to do with what they want, with what they acquired in life. And I think a good verse to look at, and going back to the Bible, of course, because that's just the big book, the book I go to for all answers, is Ecclesiastes is a book that was written allegedly by Solomon, who is the wisest man ever born, in his old age, somewhere between 250 BC and 950 BC. And I don't know, that's what Wikipedia says. There's no really telling, but Solomon actually lived, I believe, in about 950 BC. And anyway, the book really is just a book that was written in the Bible, and it contemplates from a person's standpoint what the meaning of life is. And it's one of the more negative books, actually, but it's packed chock full of really important stuff. And the very first verse is vanities of vanities. All things are vanity. All things in life are vanity, because we come from nothing and we go to nothing. And Greek is Ecclesiastes is actually Greek for the preacher. So somebody way back in the day, and it was written in Greek, wrote this book to try to answer that question. what is the meaning of life, and what is a vanity, and we are there's a time to be born and a time to die. And again, it's the very first verse in that book is a vanity of vanities, all is vanity. So does life have any meaning? A particular needing question pops up when we hit a crisis, a season of desperation, a time of change, when someone dies. And the Bible, as the big answer book, in and of itself, kind of answers these questions, but really doesn't. It kind of leaves it open. The reading itself in this book gives us a few key lines. And the book is actually said it's written by Koheleth, and that's sort of a Mark Twain name for Solomon, is what they're saying. But we don't know because we didn't live there. We don't have any actual witnesses, as an attorney would put it, to say who actually wrote it. But that being said, the questioning nature of the book makes it an incredibly valuable book in our era. Herman Melville asserts in his book Moby Dick that it's the truest book of all the Bible is Ecclesiastes, because it really talks about our search for the meaning of life. And we search high and low for answers to the gnawing fear inside of us that we're all alone, that all of life is useless, and we'll just end up 6 feet under and no one will remember us, which kind of goes back to the survey I was talking about. When somebody dies and there's a survey or there's a building, then people remember that as a memorialization, just like Memorial Day. So it all kind of ties together. But people will fear that there's no one's going to remember them. There's really no answer. And the fact is that we are all searching for meaning in this lifetime. And, I didn't ever take philosophy in college, but I think I get up, in the morning when I'm feeling kind of, if I've got too much on my plate, or if I don't know how things are going to go, and I wonder what God wants me to do that day. There's always some kind of, I always question that. And it's a question that comes to me every day. And so I guess I will just read one verse from Ecclesiastes that's kind of important. What has a man from all of his toil and strain with which he toils beneath the sun? For all his days are full of pain, and his work is a vexation. Even in the night, his mind does not rest. This is all vanity. And so this kind of goes to, why are we worrying about, what somebody has or what we have to give? And, will we ever be remembered? I mean, Jesus is remembered, obviously, because it was such an important event that God sent his son, and we have all those witnesses. But I will say this, and then we're going to turn straight to our questions about wills, because it does relate to it, about property and what we acquire in our lifetime and what the meaning of life is and how hard we strive and what we do with the things that we have after we pass. And what does God want us to do with that? Okay, so the answer is, and actually I'll quote Shakespeare also here from Macbeth, a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifies nothing. Okay, from the low point of our desperation, we can turn to God, seeking that the answers for our longing for the meaning of his word and his son and sacraments. We will find that life is far from solipsistic and hard word to pronounce, and which really kind of means, I believe it means meaningless. Instead, we are made, and it's really, really the whole point of even this radio show, by serving others. We are made beautiful with eternal communication and the ultimate fulfillment of our nature through going out of ourselves in love for God and being filled by him in return. And so the bottom line is here, we serve God by serving others, and that's the meaning of our life. I believe that's what the Bible is trying to tell us in so many words. And really, you're going to get more peace and more enjoyment in life than anything that you could ever do by going to college, by trying to acquire wealth that may make you comfortable, not necessarily happy, but if you live good and you help others, you're going to have joy and happiness. And I think that's really kind of the secret. And we have got to go to a break. But when we come back, all about wills, all about what we should do, taking into consideration all of this, kind of philosophy today and what we should do with this stuff. I'm going to answer all your legal questions that you give us today and the ones I've had over the weekend about wills and estates.
Remember to download the Lone Star Community Radio app from your Google Play Apple Store. Bring Montgomery County's community radio with you anywhere with your smartphone or tablet. If you are in the Conroe area, tune in on FM 104.5, 106.1. If you are on your computer, bookmark irlonestar.com as your internet radio station. Lone Star Community Radio, broadcasting 24/7 from the heart of downtown Conroe, Texas.
Lone Star Community Radio presents the Lone Star Radio Troupe. This talented cast will perform radio plays right here in the Lone Star Studios located in downtown Conroe. There will be a new performance every first Sunday of the month. And if you miss the broadcast, just go to Lone Star Community Radio's podcast or YouTube anytime during that month. Go to irlonestar.com archives to find the Lone Star Radio Troupe's latest play that's available. This is Lone Star Community Radio, Conroe's 104.5 FM and 106.1 FM community station. Find us on the web at irlonestar.com. Lone Star Community Radio is a supporter to the performing arts in Montgomery County, Texas.
Toni L. Collins. That's the TLC in the Legal Connection, the TLC show. And we are on the air from noon to 1 every Tuesday to answer your legal questions. Today's topic, and I kind of got off a little bit on Memorial Day and sort of the meaning of life and our possessions in this lifetime. But our topic all ties back to Memorial Days and wills. And you can Facebook us on facebook.com, Legal Connection Show. And I'll answer your questions live on the air. And Ethan, our station manager, basically told me that we have a couple of questions. And what are those?
The first one is from Brooke L. Sorry, I'm terrible at pronouncing names. They say, how can I get a piece of land surveyed with my name on it?
Okay. So we have a listener that wants a survey of land to memorialize this person in the state of Texas and for the, I guess, the eternity of our historic records. And the way that works is as the way it worked in when Texas was first surveyed and we were made a republic. People acquired land by various means, and that was settling it, making an agreement with Santa Anna, which we know how that went. And part of those agreements were upheld by the Republic of Texas after the independence was won by our heroic settlers that went out there and fought for our independence. And then when we became a state, and basically how that works is people that came with that came with Stephen F. Austin to settle in the Austin colony got surveys of land through Santa Anna through a contract. And after a certain period of time, that particular land was denoted by actual surveyors. Yes, back in the early 1800s, there were people. They weren't like dummies or anything. They were very, very intelligent. They came through and they were surveyors for a living that came in and they would actually walk the land by foot and survey a particular share of land. And in the case of Stephen F. Austin, the settlers would get 1 league or whatever amount of acres that was. And 1 league was, and I forget the exact number, I think it was like 4,400 some odd acres. And it was surveyed on land. And then that would establish the boundaries and it got their name on it. So for an example, the James Hodge survey, he was really a person. Frederick Severin person, really a person. David Thomas survey, really a person. All of these surveys that you see on a map, when you go look at a map of Texas, were real people, and they really didn't live that long ago. So that being said, to answer your question, if you wanted a survey, you'd have to find a vacancy in the state of Texas where there was land that wasn't covered by an actual survey. And you could go to the place where these records are kept, which is the Texas General Land Office, and try to see if maybe those surveys were wrong. And it's unlikely at this point that the Texas General Land Office there would be a vacancy in an actual survey. And those surveys are pretty much, that's historic. They do not get replaced. They are not wiped out. Once a survey is done, that's like it's established by metes and bounds on the ground. And short of a conflict, and they did no conflict surveys back in the 1800s also, it's going to be hard to find a vacancy in the land. But if you want to get a survey in your name, I suppose there may be some ability for you to find a vacancy. I doubt that you'll be able to get a survey in your name by petitioning the state. I don't think there's any law for that. But look for a vacancy. That would be the answer to your question.
We have another question from Francesca, and this kind of leads up to what you're going to be talking about. Says, can you please explain holographic wills?
Okay. And I know Francesca. Francesca is like my best friend ever. So I'm going to give a shout out to Francesca de Lavani Cartafalsa Miranda. And I'm her I guess, listening other wants to be Fran's best friend, but I think I'm her best friend. I'm her best friend. Anna DeWinter. And she did have a question for me over the weekend because we were discussing it about holographic wills. And as we discussed on a previous show, I love holographic wills. I think that they are really the best form of identifying where you want your property to go, because a holographic will is a handwritten will, and they are valid in Texas. And the reason I like them is because it's in the person's handwriting. You don't have to go through the little will and estate stance that you have to go through at an attorney's office to make sure that it's signed properly and witnessed properly and all that. Although you can, and that's the more common practice, a holographic will stands up in court, and it can be as little as a piece of paper that you write on there. You don't have to put the word will. You just say, upon my death, I want all of my property to go to whoever, and then sign it. So let's say if you were in a car accident and you knew you didn't have a will, and you wanted everything to go to, say, your son, something that wouldn't be, the division wouldn't go through the intestate laws, like I'm going to discuss in the next segment, then you could actually write down on a piece of paper, while you're sitting there in your car, assuming that things aren't going well, this is where I want my estate to go. And that would actually hold up in court. It could be probated. Now, if you do it in advance and you don't want the expense of going to an attorney, you can also write your will out in brief handwriting. It can be as short as you want or as long as you want. The more confusion, though, the more likely it is that you may end up in court. So the shorter, the better. You can write it out. And if you're afraid you're going to lose it, or no one's going to believe, or your heirs don't know where to find it, or you give it to an attorney who may get, disbarred and moved to Las Vegas, and it gets lost in his files. And of course, you have to have the original to file. And if you don't have the original, you have more legal, maneuvers you have to go through. You can actually file that will with the county clerk. And a lot of people don't know about this, and that's why many wills are not filed with the county clerk. And it's called it's a not well-known statute called the safekeeping statute. And you can go down here to Montgomery County, Harris County, any of your county clerks, and actually ask them to file your original will in the courthouse so everyone knows you have a will. And I know that from being a landman that typically anything recorded needs to be notarized. So they may give you a little grief unless you go ahead and notarize it. And I like that too, because that has a self-proving purpose to it. And that means that the person that's getting the stuff that you're willing are whoever, for the world to know, they don't have to prove up your handwriting if you have a notary. So a self-proving affidavit, which you can find on the Montgomery County clerk site, on the Harris County probate clerk site. You can actually Google it. Let me see. There's actually a law. Let me see where that is. It is. It looks like it's the Texas Government Code 118.062 is the actual safekeeping filing statute. And if you want to have a self-proving affidavit, or if you want the actual form, you can go to the Texas Estates Code and just Google self-proving affidavit, Texas State Code. Attach that to your handwritten will, file it in the county clerk's office. You are good to go. That is going to be probated. Your will be done. Donative intent will be known, and you save a lot of money. Now, I'm not saying that I don't want people to go to an attorney to take that those fees away from attorneys, because that's what they go to law school for. A lot of times that's what their practice is about. But I'm just saying, as an attorney, as doing a service to Montgomery County and the state of Texas, you can, cut through a lot of the, legal expenses of having to probate a will and having to prepare one by handwriting it yourself, just having it notarized, and then filing it with the county clerk to make sure that everybody knows it exists, and you're good to go. So that kind of leads to my next sort of statement that I'll make, and it's about oral wills. I'm going to ask you this question, Ethan. Are oral wills valid in Texas?
I'm going to go with no.
You're right. But you would not have been right before September of 2007. Oral wills on someone's death, dying wish would have been perfectly legal if they had witnesses to prove what they had said back before 2007, but they've changed it. An oral will is no longer valid, so you better get that little scrap of paper out if you want it different from the intestate distribution. However, your property will be distributed through intestate distribution through the statutes of Texas, if that's where you're domiciled, if you don't have a will or if it's not probated properly, which in our next segment, we're going to go into what you need to have a valid will. And if you don't have one, how your property will be distributed.
Listen in Mondays at noon to hear Conroe news from local nonprofits, businesses, upcoming events, Conroe Park events, news stories, and information that matters to you with your host, Margie Taylor of Taylorized PR. For more information about being a guest, visit irlonestar.com/Conroe Culture.
Don't forget to download the Lone Star Community Radio app from your Google Play or Apple Store. Bring Montgomery County's community radio with you anywhere with your smartphone or tablet. If you are in the Conroe area, tune in on FM. That's Conroe's FM 104.5, 106.1. If you are on the computer, bookmark irlonestar.com as your internet radio station. A Lone Star Community Radio, broadcasting 24/7 from the heart of downtown Conroe, Texas.
Don't miss Lone Star Community Radio on TV and YouTube. Our talk show and music shows are featured on Our City TV, Suddenlink Channel 12, and have their own YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe to keep up with posted shows and comment on them below the video.
Hi, this is Toni L. Collins, and you're listening to The Legal Connection. We're on Tuesdays between noon and 1, your lunch hour. You can get us on irlonestar.com on the internet, or you can listen to us live on Facebook at thelegalconnectionshow.com, where you can also message us with questions and I'll answer them. And Ethan advised me that we have another question. What's that question?
Can illegals own property? What happens if they are deported?
Completely politically incorrect question, but that's kind of a broad question. People that are here illegally, the first connotation you have is that these people are poor and they've come over the border. It could very well be that somebody came over that was very wealthy, say from Europe, and their visa expired. So that question can run the gambit. And if somebody came over here and has quite a bit of money, and let's just say they're here illegally, not because they came over and they didn't do the right things, but maybe their visa expired or what have you, they buy property. People that are not citizens of the United States can buy property here. There's nothing against that. And that includes Texas. I guess if there was some deed restriction that they couldn't, they might kick into it. But more than likely, that would be found to be an unconstitutional provision and wouldn't be upheld. Now, as far as if an illegal bought property or somebody that's not here legally owns property in the state of Texas, what would happen to their property if they were deported? Well, the property would still be in their name. And so you would have to find them to find out who their heirs were. And that becomes difficult because you have to search out who these people are and or where they're located so you can try to figure out what their heirship is. If you can't find their heirship and the property was legally owned by someone who is not legal, then after a certain period of time, it would probably fall under the the escheat laws of Texas, meaning it would go to the state of Texas to be claimed, and they put like a notice out to find out. If they put a notice out, like, and people should look at that too. If you might actually own property and you have to look in there's these the Texas Secretary of State has an area where property that's not claimed is located. So look there. There's a certain period of time that you can claim property that you may not even know that you're entitled to, and that includes refunds for electric bills, things that you wouldn't even imagine that you had, stock dividends. So that's another like public service. People go look at the Texas Secretary of State and look at the area where there's unclaimed property. You may be able to get a little check for a refund for your cable bill, your electric deposit. And I even found some of my own recently. So I thought that was, that's a good question. Not sure if it was asked in a happy life, but it might have been. So that being said, let's go into our topic today. Now, what do you need to probate a will in Texas? Well, the process is kind of scary. And I got another client this weekend who had a will and was told by the attorney here in Montgomery County that created it that there really wasn't enough property in the estate to probate the will. It would be more costly than was necessary. And so if you don't probate a will, it's the same as dying without a will. And so it goes into this law of intestate that we'll get into. And I'm going to ask Ethan to give me at the 5-minute mark so I can go over what happens when you die without a will. But as far as having a will and not really knowing what to do with it and not really knowing how to evaluate whether or not it would be effective, more economic to go ahead and probate it, or just let it, the property be distributed as it would be as intestate, you have to kind of go through what it would take to probate a will. So I'm going to go over those few processes right now quickly. You have to file an application with the probate court, and the probate court will issue letters of testamentary. And that sounds really complex. It's not. These forms are in the county courthouses and the clerks. You can get them online. They're basically fill in the blank. And if you have a valid will and even if it's contested, this is how you would go about getting the will into probate. Following a 2-week waiting period, a hearing is held to prove the will is valid, and the will contains all the required formalities for the state of Texas, which is what we were talking about earlier. The holographic will, to me, is just the easiest to push through because you don't have to have witnesses. I had a case where it was a 1981 will. The only surviving witness was the decedent had also died. The only surviving witness was also likely very old and had a very common name. And somehow I found this woman who knew everything about the decedent. She was in her 80s, but very with it. She helped me get the will proved up. You run a problem though that this person might have been incompetent. I couldn't find her, common name. So you want to have a self-proving affidavit if possible, if you don't have the holistic will. And it's just a good rule of thumb to get that self-proving affidavit, which if you go to our website, I can, send you the directions on how you get to that form. You can go to the Texas Estates Code, Google it, self-proving affidavit, just slap that on the back of a will on your holistic will, you're good to go. Okay. After the will is admitted into probate and it's determined it's a valid will, the executor takes the oath, the one that's named in the will, and the court issues letters testamentary. This allows the executor to handle the estate, the things that are, paying bills, paying the taxes, getting control over the assets and what have you. And Ethan's just telling me I have 5 minutes, so I've got to run through these pretty quick. So you can ask me questions on our Facebook, and I'll be perfectly happy to respond to any questions that you have. Within 30 days after the appointment, the executor must publish a notice to creditors. Within 60 days after the probate of the will, the executor must send a statutory required notice to all the beneficiaries of the will that the will has been probated. Within 90 days after the will, the executor must file an inventory and then file it with the court. The court will accept or reject the claims that against the estate by the creditors after this notice has been sent out of the inventory. And anyway, the bottom line is you got to pay taxes. You got to handle the estate. The executor will get by statute 5% fee for executing and administering the estate. And it's not an easy thing to do, but it's a privilege. And the person that died appointed you to do that, and that's kind of how it goes. And it's not as difficult as it sounds to probate a will, so don't be afraid. If you have any questions, I guess, I don't know. I don't know how to quantify what it would cost, but it doesn't take that much legal work to probate a will if everything's done properly. Now, what I wanted to get to is dying without a will. Dying without a will in Texas is called intestate. When a person dies intestate, the Texas laws determine who will receive. Probate is the process of collecting and transferring the title of an individual's assets following death, just as we discussed. This includes settling the debts. For example, probate would be necessary to transfer the ownership of a home. But you don't have to do that. A small estates affidavit can be used in lieu of probating a will when the total assets of the estate equal $50,000 or less, excluding the homestead. So that means excluding the home. You could have a $1 million home, and if there was only $50,000 of other assets, then you could still use a small estate affidavit and not have to probate the will. So that's kind of should be good information to know about people that don't know a lot about the law, but mom had a huge house and that was all that she owned. Determination of heirship in Texas. The determination of heirship is a process by which the court determines who inherits the deceased estate based on Texas intestacy laws. The process requires the appointment of an attorney ad litem, so that gets a little bit more costly than it would be. The court can create administration. If the estate requires an administration, the court may create an independent administration if the decedent died in the last 4 years and all heirs agree on who will serve as the independent administrator, which begs the question, who are the heirs? Well, that goes to the fourth way that you can handle an estate without probating a will, even if there is a will and you'd elect not to, and that's the affidavit of heirship. And that's the one that I used when I was a landman in an oil company. I did this all the time because we were dealing with, millions of dollars of royalty going to people that didn't have a will, or I didn't know how to distribute it. It was just sitting there in the oil company. And what happens is an affidavit of heirship can be used to transfer title to real property. In oil and gas, the estate itself is real property. And there's like a bundle of 16 different types of ownership of property. It can be a house. It can be the surface. It can be oil and gas. But you can transfer this with an affidavit of heirship, and then you follow up with a deed. The affidavit of heirship is filed with the county clerk, as the deeds are. The affidavit must be signed by two disinterested parties, two disinterested witnesses who are familiar with the family history. And that's a very common way of getting around the will is an affidavit of heirship. Now, that being said, I really didn't get into as much as I would like to with regard to the descent and distribution, but I will say this. The laws have changed a little bit. Married people with children, descendant separate property will go, if it's not real estate, 1/3 to the surviving spouse, 2/3 to the children. If it's their separate property real estate, then it's going to go 1/3 to the surviving spouse and with a life estate to that surviving spouse, and then the rest will go to the kids. A community property with the same spouse, all the surviving spouse. That's different. That's changed since the 80s when I was a kid. Now, if your parents die and there's a surviving spouse and they were only married to the same person and had kids, all of the estate assets are going to go to the surviving spouse. So that's just, kind of a rule of thumb. Facebook me if you have any questions about wills and estates. This is the legalconnectionshow.com. We're here to serve the community and answering questions. Feel free to Facebook me either in a private message or to our website, which is the legalconnectionshow.com Facebook. You can ask questions live during our show, which is Tuesdays 12 to 1 at irlonestar.com. And again, this is the Legal Connection Show. And what I will always tell everybody, because this is a community service, but really it's because we serve God by serving others. And just want to make sure that y'all follow that, rule of thumb, just as we talked about today, vanity of vanities. If you live your life to help and serve others, then you're following what God wants to do, and you should have peace.
Tops, dusty roads are the only thing I know. 3 a.m. little white lines, ain't gonna stereo. They might lose a one-night stand. It's a long and winding road. It's a hard time, school of hard knocks, hard way to go.